to wake up, he naturally pulls away from the crowd. Not because he hates people, but because the usual way of connecting stops making sense. Most conversations revolve around status, gossip, or complaints. And once he begins to see through that, it gets harder to engage. He's not bitter. He's not isolating himself out of pride. He's just stopped chasing what others are still chasing. He starts to notice the performance in everyday interaction, the need to be liked, to belong, to say the right thing. And without making a big deal about it, he quietly steps back. People might still wave. They might still offer small talk. But the connection is no longer there, because it was never real to begin with. He didn't cut ties, he didn't burn bridges. He simply stopped pretending. And when he does that, distance happens on its own. This is the beginning of solitude, not loneliness, just space between who he used to be and who he's becoming. He starts to see clearly what holds people together isn't real. It's not depth, it's not truth. It's habit, comfort, and shared illusions. People bond over complaining about their jobs, over chasing status, over defending ideas they've never truly questioned. He used to do the same. He used to think that was connection. But now it feels more like noise. He notices how often people speak, just to avoid silence. How much energy goes into keeping up appearances. The constant need for validation, for agreement, for reassurance. And once he no longer needs those things himself, he sees how dependent others are on them. How relationships often survive not because of honesty, but because everyone agrees to keep the story going. He understands why people hold on to what feels familiar. He still cares. He still listens, but he no longer plays along. That shift, subtle as it is, creates distance all on its own. From the outside, he might seem the same. He still shows up. He's still polite. He hasn't disappeared completely. But something fundamental has shifted, and the people around him can feel it, even if they can't name it. They sense that he's no longer trying to impress anyone, that he's not looking for approval, that he's not playing the social game anymore. Some find it admirable, others find it unsettling, because he's no longer easy to read, because he's not performing for anyone. He doesn't flatter, doesn't compete, doesn't entertain, and that makes him hard to place. People might say he's distant, or too quiet, or that he's changed. What they really mean is, he no longer fits into the roles they've grown used to. They liked him better when he reflected their values. Now, he reflects something else, something still, grounded, and not dependent on being liked. People see him, but they don't really know him, because knowing him now would require them to see what he sees, and most people aren't ready for that. He once believed that staying connected meant staying involved, showing up, participating in conversations, maintaining appearances. But with time, that definition changed. As his priorities shifted inward, he stopped engaging out of obligation, not because he cared less, but because he no longer needed others to affirm his place in the world. He still values connection, but not if it depends on constant engagement, emotional performance, or subtle negotiation for approval. He doesn't withdraw out of resentment. He simply no longer finds value in maintaining relationships built on pretense or expectation. To those accustomed to transactional connection, his presence can feel distant. But in truth, he's simply not playing the same role anymore. He no longer speaks just to keep the peace. He no longer sees himself through other people's eyes. What emerges in that space is not loneliness, but clarity. A calm independence that allows him to remain rooted even when others come and go. He's become honest, and from that honesty, a deeper kind of freedom begins to take shape. From the outside, solitude is often misunderstood. To most people, being alone signals a lack of friends, of purpose, of belonging. But for a man who has begun to see clearly, solitude becomes something else entirely. He no longer fills his time with distractions, just to avoid being alone with himself. He no longer seeks out constant company, to escape discomfort. He's learned to sit in silence without needing it to end. What others describe as loneliness is often just unfamiliar stillness. They equate the absence of noise with emptiness. He's realized that most of what fills a typical day, talks, tasks, and duties, is just noise pretending to be important. In solitude, he sees himself without distortion. There's no one to impress, no image to maintain, and that clarity, while uncomfortable at first, becomes a source of strength. He doesn't avoid people, but he also no longer depends on them to feel complete. This shift usually confuses others. They assume he must be withdrawn, disconnected, or even arrogant. But in truth, he's simply content with his own presence. He has faced the silence most people run from and discovered it wasn't silence at all. It was peace. As he grows more inwardly stable, he becomes less predictable to others. He hasn't become cold. He is simply no longer dependent. And in that detachment, there's a kind of depth that can't be found through attachment. Once he wakes up, he can't unsee what he sees. He looks inward, and the noise quiets. He looks outward, and the world is still asleep. He sees the false certainty in people's eyes, the roles they perform, the beliefs they never question, the constant movement that masks an inner stillness they haven't touched. People often assume he must feel lonely, as if company, any company, is always better than walking alone. But they confuse isolation with absence. He is not absent. He is simply no longer performing. He has come to prefer the space that honesty creates over the closeness that illusion demands. This is the final shift. He doesn't need the world to wake up for him to feel whole. He doesn't need agreement to feel clear. And he doesn't need validation to know who he is. He walks alone, yes, but not as an outsider. As a man at peace with the cost of truth,